Hello everyone at the Scottish Summit 2021. Welcome to my session. This is a warm welcome from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. So let's start with this session. Let me first remove my big head from the screen. And of course notice the change in the session name, because the common sense in the common data service is now of course common sense in the Dataverse. And for those who didn't know and was expecting something marvelous new from Microsoft, that's a wink to all your Spider-Man fans out there, about the Dataverse, please don't feel disappointed about this session. There will be lots of new things that I will show you. The first important thing, of course, is to give a big thanks to all the sponsors that made this event possible. Without these sponsors, the session would not be possible. So ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proximo, Redspire, Agilysys, and Hitachi Solutions. Big thanks and a big shout out. Be sure to check them out whenever you can. Then some information about me. My name is Django Lohn. This was before the lockdown where all the barbers in the Netherlands were shut down. That's why this man bun is on my head right now. I work with InSpark. InSpark is a Microsoft partner within the Netherlands, and I work as a Power Platform consultant for customers who want to create business applications, biz apps, with the tools that they have available within the Power Platform. Please feel free to connect with me through Twitter, see my handle, or LinkedIn, or my blog site, nowhere365.space, to keep updated about the newest things in the Power Platform, or to discover the same bugs and the solutions that I discovered. I've created a short agenda about the topics that I want to handle today. There's a lot of demo content in my session, but I think in the first few slides that I have, which are the only slides that I have, will be some ground basic rules and some ground basic considerations about the Power Platform that I want to share, to keep all the topics in the right perspective. So the first topic is of course the Power Platform in general. It's the low-code platform that spans your whole Azure tenant when it comes to business applications or standalone applications in Office 365, Dynamics 365, within your whole environment. So the main four tools within the Power Platform are of course Power BI for visualizing interactive reports and dashboards, Power Apps for people interacting with data, Power Automate for workflows, automating actions that you want to take away from your business, and of course the latest edition, Power Virtual Agents for your low-code chatbots with an easy deployment to almost any digital experience. So the main, maybe not the main, but one of the biggest powerful aspects of the Power Platform are its data connectors, because any of these four tools are able to interact with data stored anywhere as long as you have a data connector for it. So you can use one of the standard connectors, the premium connectors that are available within the Power Platform by default, but you can always create your own data connector should there be an application that you do not have a default connector for. And that's one of the main powerful aspects that I think is its main advantage. The data itself does not require to be within the Power Platform itself. It can connect through the data connectors. Very big, important aspect. The AI Builder is of course an extra addition when it comes to integrating artificial intelligence within your business applications. So there are some really nice examples that you can incorporate within your business applications based on AI models that Microsoft has created. And when it comes to having data inside the Power Platform, the Dataverse, previously known as the Common Data Service, would be your main choice, because it's like a database out of the box. One of the main advantages of the Dataverse is that it's built on years of experience at Microsoft's side when it comes to all the requirements that you can have for your database or the data that you can store for your business applications. And that differs from functionalities like security roles, auditing and logging, record level permissions, bulk data, where you bulk edit the data or import it from a front-end experience instead of complex coded injections, a lot of data integrity checks like duplicate detection to prevent you from polluting your database, and of course friendly user interfaces. You get that instantly when you make use of the Dataverse in your business application. Compare that to a SharePoint or a SQL database where you have to add this logic yourselves. With the Dataverse, if you choose to use it within your business application, you get that out of the box. An extra bonus within the Common Data Service, of course now the Dataverse, is the Common Data Model. I don't think they have a new cool name for that yet, but it's the data model with all kind of tables and relations between those tables based on years and years of experience from Microsoft. And that gives you an immediately number of tables that you can use for your business application. One of the most common example is that of the accounts and contacts based on CRM logic, where you have companies that you store within the accounts table, and you have external contacts of personal data that are related to the companies that you do business with. So the Common Data Model is definitely something that you want to take into consideration when you start using the Dataverse. And for the die-hard techs out there, if you are using the Power Platform at the moment, even if you are not storing your business application in it already, the Power Platform tools that we just mentioned make use of the Dataverse for their configuration, and they store already data about your Power Apps and your Power Automate flows in it for different kind of purposes. So we have covered some basics on the Power Platform and the role of the Dataverse within the Power Platform. So before we deep dive into the demo part, I wanted to show you some perspective on the different layers. So mainly you have your Azure tenant, and compare that to your organization's scalable apartment within the big super deluxe building of Microsoft, because the Microsoft public cloud is of course just some computers run by Microsoft. Within your Azure tenant, you have like your Office 365 tools, you have your Azure tools like your Azure Active Directory, where your address list of your employees are kept, but you also have the Power Platform. And the Power Platform I consider to be the fun factory within your apartment. That's where the magic can happen when it comes to your business applications. Within your Power Platform, which is your fun factory, your fun floor within your whole apartment, is you can have environments. And you can consider those as some special kind of rooms within your fun factory and with different purposes. And within your rooms within your fun floor, you have solutions. And you can consider solutions as packages that you can pick up and place it anywhere. For example, I have a room, my gaming room, and I have a very comfortable chair where I like to sit in, but I have another room where I want to also have that chair. Then I can make that chair and customize it any way that I want. And I create a package of that chair. I duplicate that package in another room, in another room, in another room. And then I have the same chair that I can have in all my rooms that I want that chair in. So basically that's the added functionality of solutions within your Power Platform. You maintain it at one place, you add functionalities to it, and then you replicate it to other places without a lot of additional effort. So when you use solutions through multiple environments, it's important that as an organization you have some kind of strategy about the way that you want to use environments. So this is an example that Microsoft gives themselves. They use different environments for geographical separation of data to make sure that Canada and USA and Australia do not share any common data within their business applications or within their environments, their Power Platform environments. And within that concept, they even make a second layer where they do the DTAP best practice, where they separate development from testing, acceptance, and production. So those are two kind of perspectives that you can have But of course, there's also a perspective that you can say, hey, I want to separate my business applications because of a line of business that I have, to separate the data from your line of business A and line of business B to make sure that they cannot interact with each other. There are some regulatory perspectives to make sure that business application A cannot interact with business application B. So note the different kind of strategies that you can have. There's no one size fits all. Just make sure that you have some kind of strategy and use it in that consistent way to make sure that you support the business in the best way possible. So we have covered the basics now, and from this moment on it's going to be full demo. So please bear with me as I end the presentation for now. And let me show you my demo tenant. So this is Karen. Karen is a Power Platform admin within her tenant, and she has been given the assignment to create a business application to store conference information in it. Then she has a Power Platform admin. She can go to admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com, and within that URL, when she has accessed it, she can see all the environments within her company. The first tip that I give is, by default, it puts in the default behind the naming of your company. I prefer to give it something like a name to make sure that people know that this is a shared environment, and it's like something like a playground, or in my case I often do something like this. I recall it to something like personal productivity, to make people aware that everyone works in this environment. And a part of your strategy when you're creating business applications could be that you do not create your business applications within the default environment, because anyone can create apps in this environment and anyone has access to the data by default. So it can take a lot of effort to make sure that you separate your business app data from the default environment where other users can also access it. Just separate your environments for your business apps if they are allowed to. Okay, so the assignment that Karen has, what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 fresh environments. And based on these environments, I'm going to create a development environment where we create our first solution. And when we have created it the way we want it, we're going to deploy that solution to a production environment. So let's call this the business app for conferences development. We're going to leave it a sandbox environment, which means that we can reset the environment anytime we want. And we're going to choose a region. It can be, for in my example, the Europe region. And this is for development purposes. I'm going to immediately create a database in it. And remember my information about the common data model, where it creates a database with all kinds of tables already in it for you. English as my default language. And I'm gonna call this my base app development. See if it's available. This needs to be a unique URL throughout the whole Microsoft Cloud. And I'm gonna change my currency, my default currency. You can have multiple currencies at the same time, but I'm gonna use Euro in my base currency. And I do not want to deploy samples. I do not want to create or use an existing security group to restrict environment for now. But if you have a security group for your development purposes, you would select that security group to have by default access to this environment. Save. So this is one of the 3 things that go wrong when you create an environment. One of the requirements is that you have at least 1 GB of database capacity. So the next step which we can try is, instead of a sandbox or a production environment, we create a trial environment. Next, and let's try this one. And it could be that this one will also fail. Yes, because there is no license assigned. So that's the second one, and we can get a premium license on my demo account by signing up based on my email address. Paste it here, submit, sign up, sign in, and start. So this was 2 of 3 that could go wrong when creating one last environment. Okay, so let's go back to our environment creation and try again. And it's being prepared. So this one I just created in my trial with Karen's account, and simultaneously I asked one of the admins to create a production environment. It can take a few moments to create the environment. Just be patient and it will show here ready once the preparing is done. So here we are at our new created environment. Let's close these notifications and refresh to see if the instance has been prepared already. And there it is. So we've tackled 2 of the 3 non-creation possibilities. The third one is a very simple setting from a Power Platform point of view. The creation of environments, and you have production and sandbox as one category and trial environments as a second category. By default, this is left on everyone. So my advice is to reduce the number of unnecessary environments which can consume your database capacity of the Dataverse, to change it to only specific admins, at least for the production and sandbox environments. And for trial environments, it depends on your organizational culture. If you want to give a lot of citizen developers the possibility to create their own environment for 30 days, and after that they need to involve someone from IT or a Power Platform admin to make it a production or sandbox environment. For now, I'm going to leave it as is because it's my demo tenant, but please be aware of this governance part and make this part of your strategy. Then before we go into the next step where we're going to create the solution within our development environment, I want to take you into the analytics part of the Power Platform Admin Center. So based on capacity, we already saw that you can create environments. And as you will see in my demo tenant, that I have reached my limit and even exceeded my limit of my database capacity, which means that I cannot create additional production or sandbox environments. So you can buy add-ons, you can assign premium licenses to users, and those will all give you extra storage capacity of your database and your files and your logging. Those are the 3 capacity types that you need and will be using within the Dataverse databases. There are a lot of analytics already available within your Power Platform Admin Center. Just give it a go, have a look at it. You see my 2 trial environments. Recently, of course, the Dataverse for Teams has been incorporated. I'm not going to cover any of that for now, but if you can handle these basics on the Dataverse, these common sense topics, they also apply on the Microsoft Teams environments. The Microsoft Teams environments just have some less possibilities when it comes to the full Dataverse databases and the full Dataverse environments that you can create the way that I did and I just showed you. Okay, let's have a look. These are the 3 environments that we have. The default environment, you use it for personal playground and personal productivity. I've created a development environment for the business app that Karen is going to create, and I've created a production environment where we're going to deploy the real business app for the end users. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is go to make.powerapps.com, which is like your Dataverse back-end user interface, and see if I can switch on the top right to my freshly created environments. Let's go to the development one. You see now I've switched and it gives me my 29 days notification. I can convert it to production. Please be aware that you need at least 1 GB of database capacity to do that. Let's see what the apps already in it. Probably nothing. By default, some apps are deployed by Microsoft. So let's go in to the next step of creating our solution. Go to Solutions, create a new solution. Give it a good name. The publisher. This is some settings that you give to your solution that determine some prefixes and a lot of possibilities for your solution. So what I always do is I create a custom publisher if I don't already have one within my environment. I'm going to give it a publisher name. So if the solutions that I make with my company in Spark, it will be like an in Spark publisher to make sure to separate the solutions of in Spark from possibly other Power Platform partners that create their own solutions. But for now, I'm going to give this the Scottish Summit publisher. Give it the prefix, something to recognize your own components of the solution. Here are some additional data that you can give about your company, if they can reach you for your solution, if you're going to deploy it, for example, to the market app source. But for now, let's save and close. Now we can select our freshly created publisher. Let's give it a minimum version number. This is the default versioning that you can get, and the 4 sequential numbers that you can give them. Just make up some ground rules on how you're going to use your versioning number in your solution. Possibly a configuration page that you link to, and of course a description. We're going to create an unmanaged solution. An unmanaged solution is the one that you're going to develop in. You're going to add functionality, change functionality. And later on, when we, as part of your Application Lifecycle Management, we will package the unmanaged solution as a managed solution, and the managed solution deploying to an environment will be uneditable in that environment for changes. So here's our fresh solution. It has nothing in it yet. And what we can do is we can add any part of the Power Platform that we want to it. So based on this assignment that Karen has, we're going to create some tables and some relations between those tables so that data can support the business app for giving and holding conferences. So let's first create a table. It's very important to give your table a very clear name, especially if you're going to use it in other solutions also. So for now, I'm going to give it like a prefix for myself, so it will be grouping together in the Dataverse when I see all my components. So this is the biz app table for conferences. You see that it gives its own prefix coming from the publisher that we created, and the display name and the plural display name is wrapped together into the table name. Usually, previously that was called the entity name. So the display name will be the primary column, will be our conference name. And you can enable or disable the possibility to add attachments. For now, I do not need it. I can add it later on. But when I enable it, I cannot remove it later on. So be aware of that. This will be the table with conferences. It will be a standard table. The other type of table is an activity table where you get a lot of extra possibilities, but this will just be a backend storage for conferences. It will be owned by a user or a team. Leave that on by default. If everyone should always see it within your whole business app, you can change it to organization. Just check some data on it and some background information if needed. All these features you can deep dive in on yourselves later on, but for now, this is the minimum that you would need for having tables. Quick update, leave the duplicate detection on by default. If needed, you can add some offline functionalities, but for now, let's create. You can see that it takes some time to provision the table in the background. We can go back to our solution and add additional tables and add additional components. Let's have a look. No components found yet, so it's provisioning now. Let's add our next table. The next table that we're going to create is, of course, the table for conference sessions, because we have conferences and within those conferences we have sessions. Again, we're gonna change the display name to an actual description of what the name is. This is a best practice from my point of view, because if you have a lot of tables that have a primary name column, which is always name, you can have some extra effort needed later on when creating your Canvas apps and your Power Automate flows. So make sure that you give it a real good primary name column. This one may have attachments enabled. So this is the table for conference sessions. Standard table, user or team owned. Leave this on by default and create a second table. Here you says enable attachments. Are you sure? Because it cannot be disabled after you enable them. Okay. Again, provisioning in the background. Let's have a look at our solution now. You can see that our first table is done provisioning. Then a third table we're going to create is a conference can have sessions and a session can have registration. Okay, and here you see that sometimes the name will become too long, so be aware of this in your naming convention in your table. So let me change this to my conference registration to make it smaller. I'm going to reuse some information again and make sure that the primary name column will be unique within my solution. And let's enable attachments here. Leave the other intact. Table for registrations within the conference sessions. Again, provisioning may take some time. Let's go back to our solution. And now we have two tables and the third one is provisioned even faster. You will see that when you make more use of your Power Platform environment during the day, that it will become faster. Probably some Azure logic at the backend. So here are 3 tables that we added to the solution. As you can see that even at this moment now, I'm not being consistent in my naming conventions. I know it's really hard, but please make sure that when you are co-creating your solution, to make some ground level agreements about how you're gonna name your tables. And of course, later on, you will also see the advantage of some naming convention in naming the relations between those tables. For now, this is fine. So earlier, I also said that within the Dataverse, usually or previously the Common Data Service, you can make use of the Common Data Model, which means that based on years of experience within Microsoft, they have their own tables already added to the Dataverse. So I'm gonna add existing tables that we already have available. It's like, why reinventing something new when there's already a lot of experience coming from Microsoft? I'm gonna add an existing table. Because based on my conference logic, I have conferences, I have sessions within those conferences, and I have registrations on those conferences. But of course, I also have speakers, and I will have people attending those sessions. And I'm going to use the contact entity, contact table that Microsoft gives us from years of CRM data modeling. I'm going to add this entity. I'm not going to include any components or any metadata. I'm just going to add it to my solution to make everyone aware that I'm using this existing table within my solution based on the default environment that's provisioned when you create a fresh database within the Dataverse. I'm going to do that again for the speakers. In my use case, the speakers will always be someone working within the company. So I have the user table. And I'm going to add that one also to my solution. I'm not going to include all components. I just want to make people aware that I'm using it like this. So these are the 5 tables that I'm going to use in my business app solution. So let's open up the first one that I created. And this is what I meant when I said a database out of the box, because I just created a simple table from my point of view, but based on all the functionalities that the Dataverse already has in it, I get all these columns, all these fields within my tables that I can use for different purposes. And this is of course very strong because I've created business apps in SharePoint, I've created business apps with Excel files, it's even with SQL databases. And these kind of fields would always have to be defined in your data source. But in the Dataverse, you get a lot of options and functionalities out of the box. For instance, also relationships, business rules that you can add, views like table views out of the box. You get these forms, dashboards that you can add, charts that you can add, and of course, eventually you'll have data within your tables. But for now, I have created the conferences table and there's no actual business data in it right now. Just the default information that shows, hey, this is a unique identifier. This is the person that created the record, when it was created, when it was modified, and by who it was modified, all these kind of things. They do not add any value to my real business application at the moment. So I'm gonna add columns, because just like any conference, there is a date where the conference is on. Just like my best practice earlier, make sure to just not add only a date column and a name column. Make sure it really says what it's used for. So it's not just the date, but it's the conference date, for example. Because maybe later on in some use case, there will be multiple dates in this table. And you want to separate them very clearly from the start on. You see, this was my prefix from the publisher. It automatically changes it to something without spaces, something that SharePoint people will probably appreciate very much. And of course, I'm going to change this to a date only column. As you can see, I can also choose date and time, but for now, I'm going to use date only. I'm going to make it required. And it's not a calculated or roller column. It's something that people input. And this will be the date of the conference. Advanced options. Column security is very interesting when you want to make sure that this column can only be changed by specific people. Something that with a SQL database or SharePoint would be nearly impossible. But from a data model point of view, I'm going to leave it as is. Leave the default as is, and here are some settings about the date and time settings. I'm going to use the user local because when you're in China, it's a different time than when you're in America. So I want it to adapt it to the real time on the local machine. Very cool. And create. You will see that it's bold, which means that it's changed, but it's not saved yet. I need to save the table before the column is actually added. So here we are. The conference name was the one that I changed for the primary name column, and the conference date is the one that I just created with the date only. It's as simple as that. Just add columns that you need for your business solution. Another tip from me is to change the unique identifier column name with something like an ID at the back, something that the Dataverse does for you already. I do the display name also because, especially in Canvas Power Apps, you will use this name. And when it's not without an ID, there can be some confusion because this also may be confused with the actual table name. So I just add ID at the back. Done. You see it says it's changed, but it's not saved yet. Save the table, and your changes have been processed. Let's go back to the solution. And every now and then when you make changes to your tables, be sure to publish your customizations. Publishing your customizations, make sure that your changes will be known throughout the whole environment. So some best practice, sometimes you think, hey, I changed that, and you go to your Canvas app and you don't notice the change. Make sure that you publish your customizations after you've done some changes. Okay, so we just added a column to the conference table. I also want to add a column to the conference session table. So I have sessions within my conference, but I also want to make sure that it has a date and time of the session. And I'm even gonna add two columns because there's a starting moment. I'm gonna copy it, and there's an end moment. So I'm gonna say, hey, this will be a date and time. It will be required upon creation. So this will be the starting moment of the session. No advanced options needed, and done. Add again. It says here, it says a column with this name already exists, so you cannot add the same column twice. This will be an end moment, a date and time, no advanced options needed, and done. Now I have two changes pending when I save the table, and at the moment, let's save it. Okay, so we added two extra columns, and now there will be a relationship between the conference session and of course the conference in which this session is kept. And that's the relationship table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a relationship, and it will be a many-to-one relationship because one conference can have multiple sessions, but the session will always be linked to one conference. So it's many sessions relate to one conference. And I'm going to use the table that we created earlier. And this is the advantage of prefixing your name with something at the front. It will be grouped together. So I'm going to link it to the table of conferences. And I'm going to give it a good display name because it takes over the entity name. I don't like that very much because I want to give it a meaningful name. And the meaning is this will be the conference of the session. So make sure that you give it a good name because sometimes you will have multiple types of relationships between the same table. And this explicitly says this is the conference of this session. You can change also the relationship name here, which will be used in other more Power Automate and Canvas app logic. So I'm going to also change it here. This is the conference session relationship, for example. And I'm going to define in the description. This is not for end users. This is mainly for the back-end users. I'm going to define the relationship in words. Many sessions can be related to one conference. Then you can define the type of behavior. It's referential, which means that there's a relationship from, just like it says, a reference between those two tables. There's also the parental relationship, and that means that a table can have one parent table, and that of course has a special parent-child relationship. So I'm gonna just keep it referential, and when someone deletes the conference record, I'm gonna restrict it from deleting if it has any child records beneath it. Yes, you can define your custom type of behavior where it says, hey, when you delete it, what you want to do with the related records, cascade the deletion to all underneath records. That's one single click and all related records will be deleted. Also the same for sharing when you have record level permissions. and if what you want to do when you change the parent of one of the child records, what you want to do with the rest of the child records. But for now, let's keep it simple. It will be a referential relationship, and when you delete it, I want to make sure that I don't have any orphaned sessions. So I'm going to restrict it. You cannot delete a conference unless you make sure that all the sessions below it are not orphaned, so they need to be changed in this relationship before you can remove or delete the record of the conference. Again, bold, save table. So now we've created a relationship, and you will see it here again. Also from the related table. So I can click on this related table, and now I am within my solution in the conferences table. You will see that the relationship will also be here, right? Because we have related the two tables to each other. And here it's a one-to-many, and here it's a many-to-one. So a lot of options there. Okay, so we've created the tables. I've showed you one example of a relationship. For the sake of time, I have created an extra relationships where needed. So we have the conferences, and below the conferences there are the sessions, one-to-many. Below the conference where we have the sessions, a session has a speaker, this relationship, and there is a registration, and the registration is of course related to the session which you are going to register on, and of course there is an attendee of the registration. And based on the already existing tables from the user, we will be using the speaker who is speaking at the session, and the contact table will be used of the attendee. So that's the main logic in this simplistic data model. I'm gonna then need to, and I'm gonna do that for every entity, but I'm gonna pick this table entity for an example. You need to add them to your form. So I'm gonna pick the main form, which is the biggest form that you will be using to edit and create new records. And we're gonna see the tables with the fields, and we can add those fields in it. So we can change the layout of the form, but for now I'm just gonna keep it simple and add the columns, relationships that we just created. So this is a registration, and the registration has the session that it relates to. We can pick an attendee, and that's it for this form. So let's save, don't forget to publish, and let's see what it will look like now in our backend when we try to add new data within this table. So normally you would use model-driven apps and Canvas apps or Power Automate flows to populate these records, but let's add one as an example. So like I already said, these kind of forms will be used in your model-driven apps, model-driven Power Apps, but for now let's create one from the backend. So as you can see, it will be a registration. And the session is not already there as a record in your table. So what you can do in model-driven apps is the relationships show in the form themselves. So let's add a new conference session just from within this experience. Save and continue. The conference session name is of course Common Sense in the Dataverse. There's no conference yet, so I'm also gonna need to add that one. Save and continue. The required starting date and starting moment. And this is of course the Scottish Summit. Save and close to go back. Now you will see the freshly created record here. Save and close. And now you will see my registration here. And who will be attending. There's no contact yet, no external contact. Save and close. And save and close. You can refresh the data. And now my record is here. And you will see in all the other tables that all the records that I just created are now also there. This is the contact table, freshly created Usain Bolt. The user table is populated from your Azure Active Directory, and of course the conferences table. So now the data model within our simplistic solution is complete. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna skip the part of the environment variables. I'm gonna show you the application lifecycle management options, because based on that I can tell you how environment variables will also be helping. So in my use case, don't forget to publish all your customizations. In my use case, I want that when someone registers for a session, I want a Power Automate flow to notify our conferences team about it. And for development purposes, I've created two Microsoft Teams teams. One for development purposes and one for the real deal. And what I can do now is when the customizations are published, I can export my solution. And there are some publish checks that you can do before you export it, but let's export it to a major version ready for go live. As you can see, I will export it as a managed solution into my production environment. So you can see that the solution has been exported successfully. So now it's in my download files, and I will switch to the production environment and go to the solutions there, and I'm going to import it. So after a successful import, your solution will now be in your production environment. As you will see that it has imported all my entities and not the data. So it's just the modeling that has been imported from the zip file. It's very interesting to unzip your file and see what components are in your zip file. So please do that anytime you want. Just remember that you can only import these type of zip files to the solution. You see no data here. So it's only importing your data model and the components in your solution. And now you can use them within this environment. And the main thing that I wanted to show you, but I don't have enough time to completely walk you through it, is related to the teams concept. Based on environment variables, you can create a Power Automate flow within your solution. And within an environment variable, you will put in the ID, the GUID of your dev team in your development environment and the GUID of your production team in your production environment. And that will make the flow work immediately to the right Microsoft Teams team. That's one of the main advantages of an environment variable. The data being used in a solution will be variable depending on the environment where it's been imported. So that's the main thing that I wanted to show you regarding solutions and environment variables. So this means that we have come to an end of my session. We have discussed about the Power Platform in general, and I've showed you a lot of demo about the tables, the application lifecycle management, and how environment variables fit in. Then only thing left for me is to thank you for your time. Thank you for joining my session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Stay safe and stay healthy.